Hello everyone, this is TomboTheTornado doing episode 2 of Seeking the Truth. So before we start this episode, I'd like to apologise for my absence. I had extensive work done on my teeth and my jawline, which has been very, very painful. And for a couple of days there I couldn't speak at all, but I have been keeping up with the research not only for this episode but for the next as well, so I'm hoping to get the next episode out a lot quicker than this one. Furthermore, I'd like to apologise if I miss any facts about America. Being born in the UK, sometimes I'm not 100% on the mark, and if I miss something or if I get something wrong, please comment below. Please don't rage, just give me a comment below, say, hey, you missed something or you did this slightly wrong, and I will correct myself and put it in the description or in the comments. Thank you very much. So in this episode, I'll be focused on the geography of Forbidden West. I'll include landmarks, underwater sections, the changing landscape and what that means, and the impact of enduring victory. So let's start there. Enduring victory. As you may or may not know, Horizon Zero Dawn was set in America in the states of Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. Nora lands were in Colorado. In the frozen wilds, we see Wyoming with Yellowstone National Park, obviously. And finally, the Kaja, which set in Utah, specifically Glen Canyon. So we've got at least some landmarks we know so we can base around. And geography doesn't really change, even though the landscape gets decimated, the geography for the most part remains the same. With Forbidden West promising to be bigger, I can safely assume that there'll be at least 3 states, Arizona, Nevada, and California. In the trailer for Forbidden West, we see the Golden Gate Bridge as well as a dragon, which tends to suggest gambling, which probably means Las Vegas. So starting with the most obvious, we have the Golden Gate Bridge, which means we're in California, in the trailer, and by the sea. So you all know by now what I'm going to say. I'm going to climb the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm going to do it. It does look like I'll have to swim out to sea a bit. Shouldn't be a problem. As you know, I've done that before. I'm going to climb to the very top. I can promise you that. I am going to climb to the top. So, a little bit of a tangent there. Sorry about that. So in the trailer, we see battered warships. We see the bridge in ruins and metal devils. A seawall defense is mentioned, but there is no sign of this. My guess is that the combined power of the Fire Swarm and just basically time afterwards completely destroyed both ships and walls. So with underwater traversal now, it's possible some of those relics may be underwater, but we'll cover that a little bit later on. So what's in San Francisco, apart from the bridge? Well, it's home of the California Maritime Academy, which, in my view, could be the Kalmar Sprawl. We first hear of this mentioned in the Grave Hoard, where there are several data logs, including talking about the Eastern Seawall and the final battle that took place repelling the machines from the coast.
Log. Third Battle of California Marine. The swarm came in from the Pacific, and I don't know if it was the local Minutemen or the crazy 15th, but they'd set the garbage patch alight. Man, the sea was on fire. That stuff was... The first wave of bots came in covered in burning sludge. It bought us an hour or two of slaughtering them on the beaches before the swarm recalculated. We pulled them inland, back through the Kalmar Sprawl. Dropped buildings on them, EMP'd the grid. Standard operating procedure. The last time I was in California, I was 5, 6? The light was like that vintage social net filter that was everywhere in the 40s. Log. First battle of the Eastern Seaboard Wall. Had a long run up to it. This was before Kalmar. and projections were a lot worse for the east. For 3 weeks, we kept getting scrambled out to some coastal burg to train Minutemen. It was always raining on account of Europe already being torched. Block after block of prefab barracks. They were still printing barracks right up until the hour the main force hit. The Minutemen? We ran combat drills with them in the streets where they'd lived, trying to pretend they might live to die somewhere else if they paid attention. Nothing worse than the ones who actually bought into it. Hopeful, pestering us with questions about Zero Dawn like we know something they don't. I swear, the more we do this, the more like the bots we are. Except they learn from every fight. And us? I'm not so sure.
Before the Pharaoh Swarm, most of the military had been defunct. It's my belief to honour this academy, they renamed a section of the city and that became the Kalmar Sprawl. We can safely assume the most part of the city is going to be in ruins. We may not even get data logs due to EMP bursts. There were apparently buildings dropped on them, as we just heard. So we might not get many data logs. My hope is that we will. I'd like to hear first-hand accounts of the battle. Personally, I'd like to see sort of holographic logs maybe of how it went down. Maybe you'll get one of those strange, funny propaganda holo vids where it's like, join the force, we're fighting back the swarm. But bear in mind, this is towards the end of the Enduring Victory battles here. This is pretty much where hope disappeared for humanity. So I doubt we'll get anything much like that. It would be nice though. What we probably are going to see a lot of are tanks and probably airplanes that have crashed. In the trailer we saw one that was crashed into buildings, and we know that air sports has had a lot of influence over stopping the swarm in the past. It certainly succeeded in many bombing runs previously. Currently, Atlanta Airport is the busiest airport in West America, so it stands to reason that this would be true in the future. So we're talking Pharaoh Swarm, Enduring Victory, all that happening, and this airport would be launching the planes out of there. That would be my guess. However, this is awfully close to the front line, so they might have transferred that air support from California to Phoenix as time went on. If the fallback point was Phoenix Airport, then that would have been the last gasp of American air support. There wouldn't be anywhere else to fall back to that would be large enough to launch planes. However, we know that they could print barracks. How much would it take to print an airport, or at least a strip of tarmac to take off from? I think it would be very interesting to see like a partially 3D printed airport. That would be really cool to see, and whether that technology survived the Pharaoh Swarm, who knows? Maybe we'll see it, but I doubt it. It would be nice, but hey, we can't have everything, can we? Due to the data logs recovered in the Grave Horde, we can safely assume the entire eastern seaboard was trained and ready to fight the plague. There are several references to Minutemen, which seem to be volunteers, local police, or train-ups ready to repel the swarm, which means we're likely to see a lot of data logs from these people. Predictions from the east must have improved, therefore it's my belief the line in California held for much longer than they originally anticipated, but again, not indefinitely before it eventually collapsed. So, I've mentioned a lot of San Francisco, and I think it's just about time we're ready to move on. However, before we leave, I think it's important to mention a very prominent landmark, the Ames Research Center. Now, some of you might know this. The Ames Research Center is the current hub for NASA's R&D work. In short, this is where all the spacecraft, advanced planes, guidance systems, re-entry systems are designed. So, this would be a perfect place for the Odyssey to be redesigned, repurposed by far Zenith. Now, if you don't know who they are, please look at this video, which link is in the description, and I'll put the link on screen for you there. My guess is that this is going to be at least part of A level, if not a cauldron, meaning that a lot of design and tech ideas were left around in audio files, data logs. Maybe Gaia made use of this. Personally, I'd like to see more audio logs on Odyssey and Far Zenith, as they're shrouded in mystery even before the Pharaoh Plague. In-game, you only pick up little bits and pieces of their story, focusing on the main mission of Aloy. It's not really relevant, but for me, it's a little bit of a mystery that they could just dive into a little bit more. So for me, I believe that it's time this part of the story was expanded upon, if not completely solved. So staying fairly close to this region, as well as Ames, there's also the Armstrong Flight Research Center, where all experimental planes, spacecrafts, as well as hardware is produced. So all in all, I think we're looking at some Odyssey storyline in the pipeline. That's almost a cert. So moving on, our next port of call is Yosemite National Park. Certainly an iconic landscape. I believe this is where the base of the Tanakh tribe will be. As at the end of the trailer, we see them on a frozen landscape with the mountains and trees. From the picture, we see a small river, towering mountains, allowing for great vantage points. There could be some nice towers positioned there for lookouts. Vegetation on the ground tends to suggest a lot of wildlife to hunt in the area, although the Tanakh might be cannibals. It is suggested upon, but they might hunt for meat as well from animals. So like I said before, despite the Pharaoh Plague, the geography of this landscape would stay the same, meaning that the iconic waterfall and iconic Mount Whitney should still be visible, and I believe they are in this picture. Continuing our trek east, our next point of call is Death Valley. Is this the home of Vast Silver? It certainly would be ironic, especially since an AI designed to take care of the world would be put in a valley where nothing ever grows. Again, in this trailer, we see a large amount of desert, a large central building surrounded by smaller buildings, and then mirrors on the very outside. So it's clear that these are solar panels. Whatever's here needs power. So again, I'd like to see more of this storyline of Vast Silver. There's even less information about Vast Silver out there, but we're gonna really leave this to the next episode because that's plot lines, and we're going to cover all that in the next episode that's coming up. I've already done a ton of research for it, and it's some really interesting stuff there. There's some really interesting stuff for this, but I digress. So really it would make sense to have a facility out there, as mostly deserts will be left and looked over by the Pharaoh Plague. There's not much life there. Don't forget, they only were harvesting living tissue in living organisms in order to survive. They were just looking to fuel themselves and wipe out humanity. There was no, as far as I can see, no governing intelligence. So I believe the Pharaoh Plague might have overlooked, or at least partly overlooked, this section of desert. The excessive heat and sun would create for a lot of power over time. However, these solar panels look well cleaned, facility looks maintained. Of course, this could be a new facility courtesy of Gaia before her death. Judging on its location and how most of the old one's facilities have been destroyed by time or the swarm, I'm going to say it's a good guess that this could be an alpha facility as well. If this is the case, my guess is it could be Ether. The sky's going wrong, there's storms, there's problems with it. Ether would make the most sense for this facility. In my view, but time will tell on that one. We really have very little information on it. So again, that is an educated guess, but it is just a guess. Don't forget, all of this is just me summarizing what I think will be in the game, things that I know will be in the game, and theories around it. So the last two little points that I want to make here are on Phoenix and Las Vegas. Judging by the rows of cars in the sand, as well as the dragon, I'm guessing we're going to go to Las Vegas. It's the most prominent place we would go to, and that probably will be featured. I'm guessing it's going to be reclaimed by the sand. Again, judging on even the dragon is surrounded by sand, the cars in the sand. It looks like the desert has come in and retaken Las Vegas again. This might open up a little bit of underground. Maybe I think that Horizon needs some more underground sections. I know there are a lot there that they're mostly bunkers and destroyed things left by the old ones, but really what I'd like to see is an underground city. Basically, Las Vegas covered in dunes. The sands has really come in there, but underneath it all is this surviving city, this metropolis of an underground city. Maybe people live in there, maybe not, but I'd like to see that sort of element worked into it. I'd like to an underground city exploration would be really good. Somewhere where you can go for a long period of time, not just a narrow set path of we go here, we go there. I'd like to actually explore a whole underground section. You think in terms of the Grave Hoard, it's a very big, prominent area, but when you actually break it right down, it's very linear. It's leading you on a certain path. You will get to your destination, you'll fight, and then you'll be led out again. I'd like to see a little bit more free roaming underground, and this could be a great section to do it in. We know that they have underwater sections now, and there's probably going to be a lot of underwater exploration, but I think this is a golden opportunity just to cash in on a large underground area where we can fully explore. We're left to go where we want. Maybe there's some traps and pitfalls, maybe there's some machines. I'd just like to see a little bit more interest. Just thought of something actually. What about fighting rock breakers under there? That would be cool. A little bit of a sidebar, but you never really see rock breakers interact with any other machines above ground because most of the time they spend underground. So it would be interesting to see what sort of other machines would be in like an underground city area fighting alongside them. But I digress. Let's go back to the main point. So as for Phoenix, it's under redevelopment almost constantly. However, some treasures have remained, such as the Phoenix Library and maybe the Phoenix Castle. Phoenix was originally home of agriculture, so if the library survived, maybe some of the glyphs inside, or books as we know them, would certainly help towards the Utaru creating food on a mass scale. There's evidence that the Kaja did this in passages found about, well, the founding of Meridian. They talk about agriculture, they talk about the books that they found that they presented to the Nora that led to their expulsion from the sacred lands and their eventually founding of Meridian. And you can see that in this passage here. So, part of the new trailer, we saw a section at the end where the game developers talk about changing landscapes. There are now supercell storms out there that will flood canyons or dry out areas that allow for changing landscapes across the world in inverted commas. So I'm very interested to see how they do this, whether it be that you go across an area and then when you backtrack it's flooded, or you go into an area and affect it yourself. That will cause the area to flood or dry out, much like you did with Bergrund in the dam in Frozen Wilds. Then again, the landscapes could change very fluidly. So a supercell storm forms, creates a lot of winds, blows sand away, revealing lower sections that were sealed, like in maybe Las Vegas. Or a long time exposed area would be filled with sand and earth as a result of storms, or even with water. Certainly a very interesting concept that they're going with here. I like to see what they're trying to do with it. This certainly could have been a problem that was faced in the distant past with the resource wars and the clawback, different environmental hazards that they faced. So maybe we'll get some data logs on that. And certainly during the clawback, when the environmental projects were trying to save what was left of the planet, they were popping up all over the place. So maybe we'll see one of those in this, but I digress again. So at the very least, I'd like to see some data audio logs, or maybe even some text logs regarding the resource wars and the clawback. Spoilers for Death Stranding coming up. So at the end of, or at least near the end of Death Stranding, the weather goes haywire and there's chiral storms affecting everything, and areas that were safe become problematic and problematic areas become safe, and there's a lot of different things. I skipped over most of that section, to be fair, because by that point I'd successfully set up a zipwire section, so I didn't have to deal with it. But I've noticed a few other players have issues with it going back because areas weren't as safe as they were before. And I wonder if they're going to incorporate that sort of mentality in the game, like as you go along, as you discover things, as new and different problems pop up and you solve them one after another, are you putting that change out in the world almost and creating problems for yourself in the world? Supercell storms are forming in other sections, and as you play the game, does the landscape then change because you're playing the game, because you're following the storyline, which could add some variation on side quests, but we'll cover side quests in the next episode. Another take that they could do on this is if there was, what I want to say is, would there be a magic switch that when you turn on a storm happens, and when you turn it off, the storm doesn't happen and an area dries out? Basically, is there a way to, I'd like to see some sort of maybe weather controlling station or weather controlling tower. When you go there, certain things happen. Maybe you can make it drier, you can make it hotter, or you can create a storm, and basically a way to make areas more accessible. So is there a section that needs to be flooded? Say you come to a big hole in the ground and you think, right, there's no chance I can go down there, I'll never get out again, but if I flood it, then I can get there. Or maybe you see a large pool of water, it's too deep to get to where you need to go. Maybe that's an issue, so you decide to go to the weather tower and turn up the heat so that there's more, it dries it out, or a storm sucks out the water and suddenly you can access that area again. It's an interesting concept. I'd like to see where they go with it, but with very lack of data input on that, I really don't want to speculate too much. But please, if you have any thoughts on this section in particular, I'd love to hear from you. So please put them down in the comments, and hopefully we can get some sort of discussion going on what that could mean. And finally, we come to underwater, an issue that was never really addressed in the first game. Granted, it wasn't really needed to be addressed. However, moving on, I believe that update water exploration will be necessary and will add new depth to the game. Pun intended. So before we even begin, there are so many issues with underwater gameplay. You've got underwater machines, air is an issue, pressure, fighting, exploration, and of course interest. So looking at the most basic of things, to survive underwater you need a breathing apparatus. This is shown in the trailer, however it does not show how long you can stay underwater. There is no oxygen tank, no pressure valve, and it doesn't look a bit like it could be old one's tech rather than being created. How would you go about refilling this device? Are there underwater areas with air pockets in them? What about a machine that you can harvest air from as a resource? We do see snapmores in the trailer, but there could be shark-like machines further out. Don't forget that we're traveling to California. We might be right on the coast where the ocean is. Ocean cleaning, Poseidon might need to have very more specific types of machines for a larger body of water. We've only dealt with lakes and rivers so far, so we might see some sort of new machine for cleaning oceans, and we might find Poseidon on the coast. It would make sense. As for the technology itself, if it is Old One's tech, is there an area where a lot of these items exist? Does that mean that others can use this technology? Does this mean others have found this technology and are using them and have shown Aloy where they are? Could there be another clan that uses this technology specifically? And would they be friendly or enemies? Could it be like a Last of Us 2 creation where you used water to infiltrate bandit camps? Exits underwater, entrances underwater where infiltration becomes key, and stealth areas could be made a little bit more simplified with water exploration rather than overground. However, this could be a pain, especially if you have to complete underwater puzzles. Surface and dive just to get the combination right. It could become a real pain. A good example of this would be a partially submerged cauldron. Hey, those water machines have to come from somewhere, and if they're only water-dwelling machines, then they have to be coming out of a cauldron, at least partially submerged. My worry with this is it could be incredibly annoying and turn a very interesting section and possibly a very fun area into an incredibly frustrating area of surface dive, especially if you have to upgrade your breathing apparatus. So you could spend a lot more time underwater in that section, whereas if you successfully upgrade your tech all the way, it could be a very interesting and fun area. I really don't want to see that to happen. I really want there to be a partially submerged or at least an underwater air pocket cauldron, which will be a really fun area to explore. I really want it to work, guys. The realist in me tends to doubt it. I think it could be probably a very slow point in the game where a lot of underwater puzzles will hinder the player. It's something I don't want to see. I'm fighting against my deeper impulses that it will be brilliant, it will be fun, it will be exciting. Time will tell on that one, really, and we're just going to have to wait and see. I guess my point on this one is something becomes very repetitive when you have to dive in and out of the water so many times just to solve a simple puzzle. That could get repetitive, very repetitive, and that could be a pain. What I want to see is a nice underwater cauldron with enough underwater sections to make it varied, but not too many that it becomes frustrating. We want that nice, perfect balance. I think we all want that. I think we all deserve that, to be fair. Time will tell. As for fighting underwater, it's not really covered in this section. However, I am going to go and touch on it a little bit and just say that underwater fighting would be interesting. Obviously, fire's completely out. Ice would be kind of counterintuitive, as would electricity. Imagine using electricity underwater, geez. But maybe some sort of harpoon, or certainly your spear would come in handy. Overriding underwater machines, that's an interesting idea. I'm not exactly sure how that would work, but it's an interesting concept. I think that's something we're just going to have to wait for. I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but harpoon could be fun with a small stunner on the end so that when it's far enough away from you, it's not going to affect you. But water and electricity, not a great idea. So I'll be interested to see what they come up with there. Similarly with pressure, there's no pressure gauge. I'm guessing after a while you're going to hit an invisible wall or something else that will stop you from going into the very depths. They might rig it so that you can go further down than you think. Personally, I don't think they're going to let you go too far down. I think they're going to keep the sea bottom of the level from going too far down. So I think that you can't essentially swim out all the way out to sea and go down to the very depths without dying, or at least there'll be some sort of death wall or maybe invisible wall or something. But pressure, I don't think is going to come into it too much. There was no diving suit, as it were, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. No Old subs probably remained. I don't think it's going to be that kind of exploration. So pressure, not really an issue for me, but hey, I've been wrong before, I could be wrong again. The final note I need to make about underwater travel is, of course, scenery. There's no point in putting in underwater travel if there is not going to be great and amazing and captivating seascapes like there is in the initial game. Alright, landscapes in the original game, but hey, we're underwater, it's seascape. We want it to look interesting, we want it to look varied, we want it to look different, we want a lot. It creates a lot of expectation in my view. It's gonna be interesting underwater. There's certainly submerged buildings, but what about everything else? So will you need a light underwater at night? Will shade create different areas or different machines? Or will it just be very scripted? In California, they talk about the Battle of the Sea Walls, so will you be able to see the sea wreckage out to sea, the ships that sank there, maybe some Pharaoh robots underwater that were destroyed in the battle, warships, or parts of planes. I'm interested to see how they pull this one off, especially due to the fact that it's an area in the game that's very much lacking in the original. We had so much to explore on land. There was so much places to go. But when it came to the water, they've just kind of had it there. It was not really acted upon unless you needed to fish. There wasn't really any point going near water. Maybe for some snap moors, but that's about it. And certainly the submerged building we saw, it's a building underwater. Can we explore all of it? Will parts of it be blocked off? Will it be like exploring the city buildings? Now I know I go to new heights on those buildings and I go above the design level. So going underwater, will they get lazy with it? Is basically my question. After a certain depth, will the buildings just become very generic, or can you explore them for all their magnificence? I'd like to see it. I'd like to see buildings underwater and you can explore as much of the seascape as possible given your air limits, but we'll see. I guess that's really what it boils down to at the very end. Where can we go? How long can we stay there? Next time on Seeking the Truth, I'm going to look at storyline quests, variety, and decisions. As always, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. If enough people ask questions, I will create a between episode to answer them, as well as any open discussions you want to have. That's perfectly fine. But if there's not enough of these comments, then I'll just answer them in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.